So let's hear our next panel of speakers to discuss what are the stories they came across this year that made them excited, which overwhelmed, which underwhelmed, conferences that excited you maybe. So thank you again, Peppo, for powering this track, and also I wanted to thank Market Across and CoinState for helping us draft the content for this track. And without further ado, I wanted to introduce our moderator for this panel, but before that, I wanted to remind you about Slido. So if you have any questions, do scan that QR code and select stage 2. So input your questions for our panelists. They will answer it right after the session. And do stay back for the startups show. They are going to battle it out on our Crypto Busters show, and we have 12 investors that's going to score them. Last year, we had 2 startups that got funded through BlockShow, so maybe 1 or 2 or 3 will get lucky this year. Also, right, so let me introduce Larry CERMAK. He is the Research and Analysis Director at The Block. He will be moderating the next panel. And please fix your eyes to the screen because we have prepared a video to introduce our panelists. So please do give them a big round of applause to welcome them on stage.
Hey everyone, so my name is Larry. I'm the Director of Research at The Block. We're a media and research company. I work on the research side, but all of us on this panel have some kind of connection to media or marketing, so we're going to be focusing mostly on that today. Now I would like to give a chance for you guys to introduce yourself briefly and mention one thing that excited you in 2019.
Thank you, Larry. My name is Angela, and I'm coming from Jinse Finance. We are based in Beijing, and we are the largest and top 1 Chinese media in China or around the world. And the most interesting things happened to me, I think, is the announcement by President Xi, because he said the China will be like fully support by the fully support to the blockchain technology, and just after Jack said China is a real threat to U.S. government. So I think that is the interesting things. And also after the announcement, you can see the price of Bitcoin just pump up. So that's the interesting things, I think. Thank you.
My name's ITAI. I'm the COO of Market Across. We are a Tel Aviv-based marketing and PR agency. For me, I think the most exciting thing is seeing people that are still here. So players I saw in 2017, and let's say that a lot of the players I didn't like are not here, and a lot of the players I do like are still here. So I like the fact that we're here and we're a bit more B2B, a bit less B2C, and we're actually talking about use cases, clients, conversions, businesses. So I'm excited about that. I don't see as many icons of big coins and no buy now signs. So yep, pretty excited to see the ones that stick around.
I'm SCIANNA, head growth at Qtum. What excited me the most was Facebook joining into the game with Libra. Everybody seems to hate Facebook, and they probably are the worst company to lead an initiative such as Libra. So I think it's very interesting in how they kind of took a lot of attention from the space, but they also brought a lot of attention. So we'll see how that goes.
Just as a segue, the Libra website itself would not be approved on Facebook to run ads if it was not Libra. It has the word blockchain, it has the word token. So if any other company other than Facebook would head Libra, that would be banned by advertising on Facebook, which I just find pretty funny.
So my experience is in the Western media. Our site is mostly focused on news in the US. We also cover Europe, but it seems like there is actually a pretty big divide between what gets covered in the US and what gets covered in China and Asia overall. So how do you guys kind of see the differences there? How is the message different in the US and in Asia when you communicate different news?
Well, I think in China there's a lot more layers of communication. Maybe a lot of it is actually peer-to-peer and word of mouth, because for the past year, a year and a half, they kind of just shut down all communication. They'll shut down your Weibo account, they'll shut down your WeChat account. So it's very hard to do marketing in China and be pretty grandiose about what you're saying. And in the US, it's more straightforward, but also there's a high degree of skepticism because, you know, and when 2017 hit, every journalist was probably getting like 10 plus emails a day just about blockchain, even if they're not in the blockchain media space. So I think that's one of the key differences.
At least from my perspective, I think that the quote-unquote Western side is a bit more PR-based and news-based, and I would think that the more, I would say, Asia side is a bit more community-based. So there's not a lot of news sources that anyone trusts, I think, in the East, and of course we have the biggest one here. So it's more about getting one story there and then pushing it on your Kakao channels or whatever, and I would think that in the West, there are still a few more news outlets so that are quote-unquote credible, so it's a bit more of a PR game and less of a community-building game, I guess.
In my opinion, it's like China has very different channels of how to spread the news, and as they mentioned, China is like the community-based place. Yeah, and agree with that. But we not only community-based. I think the news website, the news app is also very important to the blockchain industry in China, such as Jinse always get the most traffic, and when we start to spread the news, we will use the community. We will use personal channel in our platform, in Baidu, in also Sohu, all those social medias. And yes, you mentioned about if you talk about token, if you talk about a lot of things in blockchain industry, you've been banned. They will shut down your account. But you know, the most interesting is China has the big population. And you can always get another account. You can always start your another channel to create content. So that's, I think, is very different from the other country. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's talk briefly about distribution channels. And there's also a big difference. You already talked about it briefly. But for example, the block mostly uses Twitter. That's the most effective for us. But in my experience, a lot of projects do use different distribution channels. For some of them, Reddit works. Some of them use Telegram effectively. So what is your experience with different distribution channels and which ones work?
Okay, so first of all, you'd ask, what's the KPI of the business? So let's say if you have a token, you also have token holders, but you're supposed to at least also have clients. So if you want to actually acquire clients, so we're a marketing firm. We're seeing people getting into things like SEO because they maybe want to rank for blockchain for enterprises, or they're using LinkedIn, or they're using all these different things for their, I would say, business. And yes, for, I would say, their coin or token base, PR, of course. Reddit, I think, is big. But to be honest, I really think that YouTube and influencers and podcasts are becoming very, very big distribution channels, much less Telegram. I can tell that I see a lot of people moving out of Telegram. I see companies closing their Telegram channel, turning it into an announcement-based system. So yeah, I would say there's the business side, which I'm much more excited to see, to be honest. The token side of the marketing is there, but we also are seeing people trying to communicate where the industry that they're disrupting is communicating in.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a consolidation in the outlets that people send their messaging. Telegram was huge, so was Discord and Slack, but they kind of got overwhelmed with the amount of scammers and just like trying to take people from the channel, saying there's free airdrops. So I think it's moved back a lot towards Twitter and the mainstream media, at least in the crypto media space. So
I actually tend to disagree. I apologize. I think that Twitter is like our industry, a bit of a circle jerk. So crypto Twitter, we're all there to see who sees these, whatever. But I don't think that, quote unquote, again, token holders maybe, but I don't think that buyers of wallets or whatever will actually see Twitter. It's more of, I think, us and the little people we see on tour and we see fighting amongst each other. But I think that Twitter's a bunch of noise, to be honest. At least crypto Twitter. I don't get it. With the avocados and I don't know, you know.
yeah, it's definitely industry people talking to other industry people on Twitter.
From China's side, we can't use YouTube. We can't use Telegram. We can't use Twitter. We can't use everything. Yeah. So we have to use it's not our choice. So we have to use WeChat. We have to use Weibo, and that's the way we can like spread the news. And there are a lot of news apps. They include community in itself, so we can like talk about a token there, and all the companies have community in its app. They like registered in other country, not in China. It's very sad. Yeah.
So the space is now very different than it used to be, right? In 2017, it was a lot of ICOs. Now it's turning into a little bit more, professional space. It's more, regulations are a little bit more clear. So I wonder how has the message changed since 2017? Qtum, for example, had an ICO in 2017.
I think the first ICO of 2017.
Maybe the first one. So, what do you see changing with the message? How are teams communicating now as opposed to how they were communicating before? Is it getting more professional there as well?
Yeah, I think the messaging has had to get a lot more creative because journalists have heard the same story over and over again. I mean, there isn't so many key differentiators in the space. It's more like, oh, now we do 1 million in one transactions, and that's supposed to be big news, but
My network goes to 11. Yeah.
so it's just crazy, like, to think that the same messaging will work, and now the sheer volume of people trying to pitch the same story, and that's why like a lot of media outlets they'll just focus on like Bitcoin and a few others because they can't cipher through every token project and know everything about it. So the messaging has to be very clear and it has to be different. And I think that's why we'll see like more people get into the guerrilla marketing space, or like now people are buying actual companies because that's different, and that's the only way you're going to get a story if it's truly different.
Yeah, so to segue from or continue what he said, I agree that when people come to me now and say, oh, I have a base protocol, I'm like, all right, I'm not sure we need another one. So there's starting to be something like SWOT analysis. It could be a product one, or it could be in 2017 when I'd say, who's your competitor? They're like, oh, we have no competitors. Well, first of all, if you want to do an ICO, 7 people have done your exact white paper already, and most of them have failed. And also, if you're trying to disrupt something, then people are alive, they're interacting, there's a business out there. So no one's waiting for your blockchain solution, so you do have a competitor who's winning right now. So I think companies are understanding that right now. A year ago, it was like looking at the top projects like Qtum or whatever, or Ether. Oh, we're what Ethereum meant to be. Now I think there are people actually looking at maybe their non-centralized competitors and how they can do it better. And I think that also when you're talking about, I see mergers and acquisitions. So I work with Tron. Again, love him or hate him, Tron's buying business. It's building stuff and incentivizing it. You see RSK, another, they just bought a big company. So people are saying, we're not going to wait for people to build on blockchain because once the token issue kind of closed, less developers are building. So we have money. We're going to buy the platforms. We're gonna make it happen, and I think that you're going to see much more of that, because as I said, developers have not jumped on the ship as people thought it is. So the big platforms are buying companies and putting blockchain on them.
So in our group, we not only have Jinse Finance for the media part, we also have Node Capital. And in 2017, we found there are a lot of projects that we can like invest in for the infrastructure. But from this year, we don't see a lot of new projects coming out. And it's very sad because there is no new things comes out. And we want to invest some real good things, but we can't find, especially in America. I just come back from San Francisco Blockchain Week, and there I think most of them the company wants to focus on AI, not blockchain. So it's so we can't find
Or cannabis tech or buzzword or.
yeah, they don't care about blockchain. It's very different. Yeah, but it's very different in China. Yeah, just because presidency. Yeah.
So we already briefly touched upon that, but 2 weeks ago, probably the biggest news of the year, when the Chinese president announced that China is going to heavily start investing in blockchain. And we've already seen some projects, increase in price drastically, a lot more interest. Newspapers are even covering Bitcoin and other public blockchains. So how do you think that's going to affect, overall the space, and how is it affecting the companies that you guys work for?
I think first of all is the money, because if you look back, you can see if a president of China bring out a topic, which one the Chinese government will fully support, will always get a lot of money into that industry, like AI. So this is the first thing I think will impact. And the second is it will bring a lot of traditional companies, big companies, will into this area, and they will add it. Blockchain into their company, into their protocols. So I think these two things is the most important effect of the whole industry in China. Yeah.
I think for me the crazy thing is that it went 180 from companies that are based in China that didn't know if they're fugitives from the law and can they even say they're in China or there. Now this is super, positive, and it's great that they're in China. So I think you're going to see a lot of projects and protocols and companies that raised money and kind of went dormant because they were just afraid to even say they're in China, to now being like, we're here, we're proud, and we're Chinese, which should be really, really, I think, interesting.
But do you think that will happen for public blockchains as well? It seems like the news were mostly focused, around permission blockchains and around blockchains overall.
Yeah, I think that most of the people that are excited about this news have no idea what public or permission is. It's the fact that blockchain plus China does not equal illegal, and it's even the farthest from it. So I think that's the big issue for me.
I think will affect the public chain, because there are a lot of public chain in China, such as Qtum, such as Neo. They are before the announcement. They are, I think, is struggling in China. They can't say, "Oh, we are made in China." It's like we registered in other places. And now, after the announcement, and they can really do something to maybe raise another round of money and to improve their functions. Yeah.
I hope there's no ICO2s for this same token project. I mean, that would be pretty crazy, but we've seen it. So, yeah, the Xi news definitely helped being a little more public. And as Itai said, yeah, perhaps Alibaba and Tencent will eat up the majority of the business for permission chains, but there's a huge demand for China and just internally for blockchain expertise. And this space has always been constrained for resources in terms of human capital. So they're going to have to go to the public chains as well as these other big companies. So it's just, yeah, 90% will go, but if that 10% is left over, that's still huge in China. I think it's Shenzhen or one of the cities in the south. They have a $150 million fund just to help promote blockchain tech. And that's just one city in China.
Yes, as you just touched, the United States is not seeing a lot of development because regulatory, it's very unclear. So this also announcement is not in a political void. So while America is unclear, China is opening its doors, and I think that that's going to be really influential because again, you always need an opposite. So every door that the U.S. closes and China opens is going to bring, I think, a lot of surge.
Yeah, I think we might see some smart Western projects try to do some business in China.
But it has to be good.
Yeah. Smart, that's my keyword.
Another thing I would like to talk about is a lot of the projects in the space go public, right? Some of them do ICOs, whether it's ICOs, IEOs, whatever, but it's not as, it's not the same process as when the company goes public in the US. They have reporting requirements and filing requirements, and it's much more structured. So how do you make sure that even though there are no formal requirements, you stay transparent with your investors as a project and even as a firm that works for this project?
So I think that when you see with IEOs, and I think that IEOs are almost already dead. Well, there's a few platforms that are big because now you see that there's a business responsibility. Right. So Binance and Huobi and all these, they're a multi-billion-dollar business. They're not going to jeopardize their business for a short squeeze. So you're starting to see that kind of so there's accountability on the business level. Because apparently on the ICO level, if I worked at Morgan Stanley for a few years and put my face on the website and I'll get $100,000, I'll do that. But the big businesses, so we're starting to have gatekeepers in our decentralized world, but those gatekeepers have a lot to lose. So most likely if Huobi or Binance or one of these platforms vetted it and looked at it, there's a much bigger chance. So I see that businesses now are more being that kind of middleman.
So another thing that I think is interesting is that in 2017, a lot of the excitement was around retail investors, right? A lot of retail investors started getting involved and the prices skyrocketed. This year it seems a little bit different. At least from the data that I've seen, there just isn't that much retail interest. So how is that affecting, or is that the trend that you guys are seeing as well, and how is that affecting the project's NPR?
Well, I think that's just a sign of the market maturing because the retail investors got burned. So they're not telling their friends anymore, hey, I made a bunch of money. I'm sure they're probably the quietest people in the office and they're kind of shamed by all their friends. So that's why projects have had to go back to traditional VC and provide real use cases for their blockchains.
So first of all, we're seeing some tokenized projects actually do VC rounds now, so I think that's interesting. But I would say as a service provider, most of my clients are not affected by price. I don't talk about it. We have a strategy, and I don't see that. We do have some clients who are a bit more weary, but it's not investors or their own token price. It's about Bitcoin price. So when Bitcoin's taking a big hit, maybe they'll be like, oh, I don't know if it's a good time to work. But Bitcoin has become the standard, and I think that Bitcoin's even just getting bigger. So they don't look at I don't see people saying, oh, Ethereum's getting a hit. Let's lay low for a while. But yes, when Bitcoin is up, I get more emails, and when Bitcoin is down, I sometimes get let's pause.
Why do you think it's so correlated with all the prices?
I've never raised any money from so I don't know. It's hard for me to say. Bitcoin has just become our standard, I guess. Because Bitcoin is by far the best use case of what we're trying to build here. So if it's a good sentiment about Bitcoin, then we can talk about it. If Bitcoin's getting a hit, who are we to say what we're doing is better?
Bitcoin is the consensus, right? Yeah, I think I also agree with that. If Bitcoin's prices goes up, we can receive a lot of emails from the clients. So yeah, it's just like that.
It sort of dominates the news cycle. I mean, most people hold Bitcoin, so if it's up, they're gonna go check, see what the news is. It's just, yeah, it's correlated.
I love that there's still these stories on all the big financial news, like Bitcoin price roundups. Lunar moon is at 3, whatever. Bitcoin will go 10,000. But people still care about that. My dad, who I think thinks I'm some kind of a drug dealer sometimes, but when Bitcoin goes up, he's like, "Oh, do you still have some of that?" You know, and I'm like, "I thought it's stupid, Dad." So Bitcoin is still, I think, the only thing that by the general public of what we're doing is not seen as a scam.
Another thing is that the media in crypto is not the most reliable, right? Like all of us know that. I work for a media company and I see it every day. I see companies covering bad news, doing mistakes. So it's just not really professional. And then there are the traditional media companies like Bloomberg, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and they also don't do such a good job, and mostly because they don't have teams that focus on crypto, and they're also just not that interested in it when there's not that much interest. So how do you guys deal with, when, for example, someone covers something wrong or when they make a mistake? What are the strategies to kind of mitigate that?
Well, the best strategy is to educate the journalists, because journalists, they can't be an expert in everything. Especially for mainstream journalism, they're covering 100 different tech sectors. It's really crazy, and I mean, if you can't explain it to your mom, then don't try to explain it to the journalist.
So my opinion is a bit different. I think that modern tech journalism is kind of screwed up. I feel that TechCrunch only covers acquisitions and investments, whatever. It doesn't really cover tech anymore. And unfortunately, some of the big blockchain publications, in order to look clean, are doing the same, but then they're forcing the companies to do big announcements all the time. So because, again, most of the big publications, and I pitch them all the time, you need a big headline. So they're kind of forcing these partnerships instead of talking about the more wider subjects, because then that publication thinks it might be shilling or whatever. So it's a bit of a touchy place, but I wouldn't want blockchain journalism to also just get into how much is the funding raise, and because that's just boring, to be honest, personally for me.
So I think, first of all, the blockchain technology or the blockchain industry is very early stage, and we are still learning from all the messages coming from like projects like blockchain and other area, and we can't make sure our like journalists won't be wrong, won't be make like tiny little mistakes, but we can always like learn from the trend of the blockchain industry, and we also do have our own academy to like teach our journalists the basic technology in the blockchain industry, and to make sure we can write the right thing to the public.
So the crypto space overall is fairly unregulated still, and like I mentioned before, there are not many formal requirements. So do you think that it would be better if it was more regulated, or is it good this way where it kind of like regulates itself?
I think that on the user side, crypto users don't really care about regulation. Look at the biggest exchanges in the world; they're not regulated, and a lot of ones that come to us and want help, and their biggest USP, unique selling proposition, is that they're regulated in some whatever country. Then I don't see that as a huge value proposition for users. For businesses and funding and corporate environments, I'm sure that's super important. An entrepreneur wants to know he's not going to go to jail. That's like a really top KPI for him, I'm sure. But users, I'm not sure users in the blockchain space actually care about regulation that much.
There is some sort of community policing. They'll call you out if you like make a partnership seem bigger than it is. So that's one form, and I think the industry is kind of moving. Masari has some transparency standards that they're trying to promote. So that, yeah, it's moving forward, and there is self-regulation, and like even though like people say Binance isn't that regulated, they're one of the hardest exchanges. If you do something bad and you try to send coins to Binance, they're frozen because they have like 5 different blockchain tracing applications that they're using. So because they're so public, they know that they need to keep things.
And they have a business incentive to keep their business going well.
Yeah. So there is some sort of self-regulation, but I think maybe we'll see like Gemini. It's like they promote that they're regulated, and perhaps that they over-regulate themselves, and it makes a bad user experience. But there's no reason that regulation should mean that there's a bad user experience.
So I have only one thought is I don't want to be cheated. So if the regulation can help me with that, I think I will go for it. But if it cannot, what the meaning of regulation?
They're also
I'm pretty sure WeWork took more than most of the crypto industry together. So people can still lose their money in a regulated environment.
Well, the private markets are less regulated than the public markets, and that's why Uber and WeWork have been able to take so much money from people, because there's no
those
price
people
discovery.
have money from pension funds, and so there's a trickle down of they took our money as well.
Yeah, but I'm sure, in crypto there's definitely more scams than almost anywhere else, right? I mean,
I'm not sure how many ICOs are running this day. It took us 2 years. It took us 2 years to stop doing ICOs. How many penny stock IPOs are still running? So I don't know. Like, again, we're so young in the game. I don't see that many huge scams raising new money right now. I might be wrong.
There's definitely a lot of scams in the public market, even in the East or the West. I've heard like stories of billion-dollar companies making Iron Man suits, but that's just not feasible.
But then you see a company like Plus Token, right? Like clear Ponzi scheme that raised almost $1 billion, and it's still happening right now. It's like almost unbelievable for me to see that happen, right? That you have Chinese retail investors putting their money into Ponzi schemes.
Yeah, but they've been able to do this because they've gone low into the community level, and they've gone to like uneducated populations. Like that's why this happens in Southeast Asia, where people don't know as much like about Bitcoin as they do in the West, because it's on all these media outlets, but it's still emerging there. And they promise these insane returns, and that's the only thing that gets them.
But most of these projects, there is no blockchain. They're using the hype of it, but it's not in. So again, do your own kind of research. But most of the people these huge Ponzi schemes are not actual blockchains. They're a person who said he's doing blockchain and is completely doing something different. So I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but these are not true blockchain projects. There was like a big story in Israel that people were scamming people for saying, oh, we'll buy Bitcoin for you. They didn't do it. But no one actually ever bought the Bitcoin. So they were just leveraging the hype of Bitcoin. They weren't scamming people with Bitcoin. They could have said, I'd buy gold or I'd buy you an apartment. They just didn't buy the thing in the end.
And I didn't see any stories about Plus Token or BitConnect on
Carrots Gold is a big story now also in Germany.
Yeah, but you didn't see these on the block or until it was like, hey, this is a scam. But it was never, this is good project.
Right, but it's kind of hard to estimate like what's the size of that, right? Like no one really knew that it was that large until it blew up. So, but yeah, so I'm gonna take some questions from the audience. We have one question about how do you approach PR when communicating a fundraise? So whether it's ICO, IO, or regulated fundraise, what are some of the strategies that you can take to communicate that effectively?
I would ask the editor.
It's a very hard question, yeah, because we have so many strategies. So we should like to see what kind is this, like if this project
it's a VC
is
or a public. Who's giving the money? Yeah, I guess the question is who's giving the money and how much. It's like it has nothing to do, I think, anymore with is it blockchain or not. If this is a regular tech company, if it's Sequoia giving money, then I'm starting to pitch with Sequoia. If it's $100 million, even if it's from a little bank in Malaysia, I'm saying $100 million. It's what's the strongest hook you have, I guess.
Is your product live as well? I mean, we see Compound, they just raised $15 million, and they raised it from credible investors.
Yeah.
So that's a good example, and it's very relevant.
Because if that is maybe an exchange want to raise money, there are still several like VC token fund or traditional VC can help them to raise money. But if it's like a public chain or something, there are a lot of like traditional VC or token fund. They just shut down the money. So it has to see what kind of the project is. So it can now to see in a like a common way.
And what they're going to do with the money? That's a really, really good question that no one asked. Let's say EOS, So yeah, what are you going to do with the money?
Cool. So we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to ask one last question. What are you guys excited about the most in next year? Why do you work in this space? What gets you going?
I think 2020 will be, I think we could say this with a little more confidence this year, but the year of actual use cases and with users reaching over 1 million people.
I want to see mergers and acquisitions. I want to see the big money that people got. I don't want the company. So a VC company, if it has no reason to exist, will close, or the money will run out, or the VC will say, "Give me the money back." So you guys raise the money. Don't burn it on years and years of talking. Go buy companies, because again, unfortunately, developers are not building. Buy the companies, buy the users. That's what I want to see.
I want to see like blockchain technology plus something, because in this is a very special case in China, and we gonna see like medical care plus blockchain. We can like provide our personal data to the blockchain system, and then maybe we can use all those data not only in China, like around the world. It can cost us less, like maybe price or something.
All right, we just ran out of time, so thank you guys for listening and have a great time.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.